All right. Hello, everybody. Today I have for you a reading of a short story written by Jacque Morgan. He wrote 5 short, humorous sci-fi stories about an inventor named Jason Q. Fosdick uh, in the 1912-1913 range. These were first published in Hugo Gernsback, one of his first magazines called Modern Electric. And then they were reprinted in 3 issues of Volume 1 of Amazing Stories. These are short, they're funny, and this one in particular I thought was actually kind of a very interesting because it actually deals with something that, if you were a science nerd when you were a kid, you maybe did an experiment with this with a something like this, and also just because it's also something that you really can't get or use or see anymore today. So I thought this was worth a look, worth a read, and so we'll get into it in a minute. This story is a story about a car powered by something called a Seidlitz powder. Now, a Seidlitz powder is kind of like the precursor to Alka-Seltzer. Alka-Seltzer uses citric acid and sodium bicarbonate to create a fizzing effect, and it also has some aspirin in there for pain relief, right? A Seidlitz powder uses something called tartaric acid, which is part of winemaking. Cream of tartar is a derivative of tartaric acid. It uses baking soda and tartrate salt, specifically sodium potassium tartrate, or Rochelle salt. And basically what you do is you put a certain amount of this acid, powdered acid, into one packet, and you call it the white packet. And then you put this tartrate salt and sodium bicarbonate into another packet, and you call it the blue packet. And then what you do is you mix the blue powder into 1 cup of water and the white powder into another cup of water, and then you slowly mix them, right? You have to keep them separate in powder form to avoid them reacting with each other, right? So you create these 2 separate cups of water, 1 acid, 1 base, base and salt technically, right? And then you mix them together slowly, you let them effervesce a little bit, and then you drink them, right? And this is what people would do to solve, bowel issues or, acid issues in their stomachs back in the, early 1900s and 1800s. Compared to Alka-Seltzer, which uses aspirin to soothe pain, and uses citric acid and baking soda with no citrate salt, as far as I can understand, as far as I can tell, the tartrate salt in the Seidlitz powder creates a buffered solution. And if you remember your high school chemistry at all, you'll recognize that a buffered solution, the cool thing about a buffered solution is that it can hold the same pH even though you add a lot of acid or a lot of base to it, relatively speaking. The salt and the acid and the base kind of work together to hold the pH of a solution at some particular spot. So this is kind of a good idea to deal with stomach acid. And in fact, the gas production of the acid and the base interacting with each other was believed to be good for laxative effects. Though, I'll get to a little bit in a minute. You got to actually be careful with how you make the stuff. The interesting thing about Seidlitz powder is that compared to stuff that we use today, it actually was not sweetened when it was given to people back in the early 1900s and before. It was supposedly something that was very bitter and very salty, and yet still was called kind of cooling and refreshing. So, I don't know. It turns out that you can actually still buy Rochelle salt, food grade, and you can still buy tartaric acid, food grade, and you can buy sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, food grade. And so, hypothetically, if you wanted to, you could make you could make Seidlitz powder today, but nobody actually manufactures it anymore because there's very little demand for it. But the important thing, if you're using a Seidlitz powder, and one thing that comes up in this story is that you have to follow the directions very carefully. This is probably one of the reasons why it went out of favor, is because if you just put the powders together and then drink the thing all of a sudden, you're going to get an awful lot of gas production inside your stomach, and that's not going to be pleasant, and it's not going to be healthy. As I mentioned, you're supposed to mix the powders into separate cups, mix the cups together slowly, and then drink it after some of the effervescence has worn off. This potential danger is probably why they're not used today. In fact, There is an epitaph of a woman who died in Burlington, Vermont that says this, quote, "Here lies the body of Marianne Lauder. She burst while drinking a Seidlitz powder. Called from this world to her heavenly rest, she should have waited till it effervesced." So, I mean, at least hypothetically, you could hurt yourself with this stuff if you weren't careful. And of course, it's just powder plus powder, so if you did a double dose or something like that, you'd get even more gas, and it might, if you had a bowel obstruction or something like that, it could be very bad for you. The funny thing about this story is that I believe it was published in 1912, but there was also a spoof article published in Flight magazine in 1916 that suggested a similar use of Seidlitz powder to run an airplane engine instead, a 5-stroke airplane engine. I wonder if the author of that article in Flight had read this story, or if he just had the same idea. I don't know, but anyway. So yeah, let's get into the reading. And of course, if you would rather read it yourself rather than hear me rattle it off for you, I'll have a link in the description and all that good stuff. So here we go. The Scientific Adventures of Mr. Fosdick by Jacque Morgan. Mr. Fosdick invents the Seidlitzmobile. Pardon me. Mr. Hiram Snodgrass did not look up from his desk. It was Saturday, and nearly noon, and the automobile was panting outside to take him out to the country club where he had a golf game on with his son-in-law. Pardon me. The president of the Ajax Manufacturing Company only dipped his pen again in the violet ink and scribbled the faster. 100 letters still remained to be signed, and Mr. Snodgrass figured that even with the simplest of luncheons, he would be an hour late upon the green. And this afternoon he purposed having his revenge for the Saturday before the husband of his offspring had stunned him to the tune of 8 up. Pardon me. Mr. Snodgrass swung in his chair. Well, what is it? The inquiry came explosively and with a fierce sudden heat, like the momentary opening of a furnace door. It was Mr. Snodgrass's way, a manner to which none in the office ever paid the slightest heed. You are Mr. Snodgrass. Yes, I am, snapped that individual. What of it? The stranger, a man with mild blue eyes and vague rambling whiskers, seated himself. Did you ever, he began, take first the blue and then the white of a common, ordinary Seidlitz powder? Mr. Snodgrass threw his head back, aghast at the query. No, I have not, he bellowed. The stranger was unperturbed. Well, then try it, and, drawing from his pocket one of the powders in question, walked coolly over to the water filter, and, filling the glass, dropped in the blue powder which he stirred with a long index finger. The result will surprise you. I'll do nothing of the dashed kind, roared Mr. Snodgrass. And say, he demanded, as he caught the stenographer tittering behind her notebook, who the devil are you, and how did you get in here? For answer, the stranger laid upon the president's desk a card. Jason Q. Fosdick, inventor. Mr. Snodgrass's features experienced a sudden transformation. The belligerent expression faded away, and a smile of genuine pleasure suffused all of the countenance visible above and in front of the mutton-chop whiskers. My dear Mr. Fosdick, I am delighted to meet you, he ejaculated. I suppose you dropped in to see how the nutcrackers are getting along. The device was an utter failure as a curling iron, but as a nutcracker it has been an unqualified success. It is going to make you a rich man, Mr. Fosdick. Your royalties are now amounting to over $100 a week. Mr. Fosdick shook his head. No, I am not here on that account. I have a new invention that I want to interest you in. And the nature of it is what? Inquired Mr. Snodgrass. An automobile run by these, and the inventor held up a Seidlitz powder. There is a wonderful lot of power in a Seidlitz powder, Mr. Snodgrass. Just take first the blue and then the white, he said, offering the glass and at the same time unfolding the white paper containing the other half of the powder. Mr. Snodgrass drew back in some alarm. No, I'll take your word for it. Please take it, insisted Mr. Fosdick. It's a beautiful experiment. It gives a pressure of 10 atmospheres, 150 pounds. Damn it, man, I'm not built for 150 pounds. I couldn't stand it. I'd blow up. I haven't any safety valve. The inventor shook his head solemnly. In that, Mr. Snodgrass, you are mistaken. The human diaphragm will stand 160 pounds. You see, there is a margin of safety of 10 pounds. The experiment is perfectly safe. "I tell you I won't," cried Mr. Snodgrass, overcome by a sudden fear that he might be persuaded into such a rash adventure. "I won't, I tell you." "Then I will," said Mr. Fosdick, calmly lifting the glass. "Just watch." "Here, stop that," cried the horrified Mr. Snodgrass. "Don't do that in here. Go down into the engine room where we have boiler insurance." But the inventor was not to be thwarted. With cool deliberation, he quaffed off first the one powder, and then the other. "Right here," he said, after a minute's wait, "there is power enough to run my Seidlitzmobile 11 2/10 miles, if my calculations are not wrong." And he placed his hand upon the pit of his stomach. "Just feel the pressure." Mr. Snodgrass extended his arm and gingerly prodded the compelling stranger under the ribs. "Not hard," said the inventor warningly. "Remember, the margin of safety is only 10 pounds. Mr. Snodgrass withdrew his hand with lightning-like rapidity, and the perspiration broke out upon his forehead. "Couldn't you go outside and sit around for a while?" he inquired with some trepidation. "Our building is not very strong, and an accident would doubtlessly maim many of our clerks." "I usually don't stir," replied Mr. Fosdick solemnly. "If I should walk about and stumble, or if I should even cough or sneeze, why then—" Yes, interrupted Mr. Snodgrass. "Just sit perfectly still," he said, turning off the electric fan. "Keep out of all drafts, and please try not to cough. I'll telephone the fire department and the police as a precaution." "Not necessary," said the inventor. "The pressure will sink to 40 pounds in 10 minutes. It was a harrowing 10 minutes for the president of the Ajax Manufacturing Company. When one has reached the mature age of 60 years and has a large family, even to grandchildren, the staking of one's life against the mere sneeze or cough of an utter stranger is an unnerving thing, and the shock and suspense of it all is more than apt to leave the faculties in a numb and dazed condition. At any rate, when Mr. Fosdick left the office a few minutes after the ordeal, he had in his pocket Mr. Snodgrass's check of $1,000 for the building of the first Seidlitzmobile. 1 month later, a team drew a queer-looking vehicle in front of the Ajax Manufacturing Company and were unhitched. "I brought it over here from the shop by mule power," explained Mr. Fosdick, "as I wanted you to take the very first ride in the Seidlitzmobile under its own steam, or gas, rather." Mr. Snodgrass looked the machine over dubiously. "It looks like a fire extinguisher," he ventured. "That's the very principle that it works on," said the inventor. "You see this reservoir," and he pointed to a large, burnished brass cylinder under the hood, "is the mixing chamber, the stomach of the machine, as it were. Into it the powders are dropped, and the carbonic acid gas actuates the two-cylinder engine geared to the back axle. This link motion controls the cutoff and the reverse, and the throttle here permits you to give the engine any head of gas. But climb in," he added, "and we'll be off." Mr. Snodgrass, with some reluctance, stepped into the machine and seated himself. Mr. Fosdick followed him, and then, fishing out of his pocket a Seidlitz powder, he unscrewed a brass cap from a tube that protruded from the floor of the machine, dropped the powder through, tooted the horn, released the brakes, and they were off. It was a downhill road, and for 2 miles, in fact for the entire length of the hill, the Seidlitzmobile behaved splendidly. Mr. Snodgrass became enthusiastic. "It's the most silent machine I ever rode in," he ejaculated. "It's as quiet as an electric." "And just think," put in Mr. Fosdick, "the machine can be retailed at $200. It will make us millions. All there is to it is a $10 engine, a brass cylinder, 4 wheels, and a Seidlitz powder. The horse is bound to become as extinct as the dodo. Every family in the land will possess one. It will be a convenience to the rich, a blessing to the poor, They had reached the bottom of the hill, and the machine stopped. "What's the matter?" demanded Mr. Snodgrass, his vision of riches suddenly fading away. Mr. Fosdick got out and looked the machine over wisely. "I think the engine has slipped an eccentric," he remarked after a few moments of profound study. "Why, man, you've no pressure!" exclaimed the passenger. "Look at the gauge." It was true. The gauge registered not a single pound. Mr. Fosdick fumbled in his pockets, but could not find another powder. "I guess that last powder must have been a weak one," he said. "But see, there is a drugstore, and every drugstore carries Seidlitz powders. As long as you keep near the drugstores, you need never run out of power." Mr. Snodgrass's spirits rose. "We can turn that remark into profit," he said. "We will copyright it. The very first thing we will do will be to spend $1 million in advertising this sentence throughout the entire world. The Seidlitzmobile, the machine that can get its power at any drugstore. Together, the two men walked into the drug shop. "A Seidlitz powder, if you please," said Mr. Fosdick, laying 10 cents upon the soda counter. The apothecary dived back into the mysterious region behind the prescription case and hibernated. An hour later he emerged and pleasantly inquired what was wanted. "A Seidlitz powder, please," reiterated Mr. Fosdick, pointing to the dime. The druggist rubbed his hands unctuously. "I'm sorry that we're out of Seidlitz powders," he said. "But we have something just as good. We have—" "Nothing but Seidlitz," roared Mr. Snodgrass, giving way to one of his sudden outbursts. The druggist smiled blandly. "How old is the patient?" he asked. "It's a machine!" cried Mr. Snodgrass. "Ah, indeed," remarked the druggist, looking at Mr. Snodgrass queerly. "And may I ask what is the matter with it?" "It won't go!" bellowed Mr. Snodgrass. Yes, agreed the druggist. "It won't go." And he backed behind the counter and reached for the telephone. "I'll have a nice man in a pretty blue suit with bright brass buttons here in just a few minutes, and he will make your head stop aching," he promised them soothingly. "You think we're crazy," accused Mr. Snodgrass. "Oh, not at all," reassured the clerk. "You are just merely overheated." Mr. Fosdick intervened. "The machine is an automobile run by carbonic acid gas," he explained. "And that's why we wanted the Seidlitz powder." A sigh of relief escaped the druggist. "Well, why didn't you say so at first?" he said. "I haven't had such a scare in years." Mr. Fosdick explained the principle of the machine. Mr. Snodgrass bought a handful of cigars and gave the druggist one, who immediately put it back in stock and abstracted a dime out of the cash register, and good feeling was restored. "As I understand it," said the druggist, "your machine generates gas in the same manner as a fire extinguisher or a soda water charger." "Precisely," agreed Mr. Fosdick. "In that case," said the druggist, "you should use bicarbonate of soda and sulfuric acid." Mr. Fosdick, with the invariable reluctance of all inventors to adopt the suggestions of outsiders, demurred. "It spoils the name of the machine," he said, "and the name is worth $1 million in itself." But the druggist had caught the contagion of his own idea. Diving back again behind the prescription case, he emerged with a bottle of acid and a large sack of bicarbonate. "Come on," he said, enthusiastically. "We'll give it a good dose." Before Mr. Fosdick could remonstrate further, the druggist had emptied a peck of the alkali into the mixing chamber and stood ready with the bottle of acid. "Get in the machine and get all ready to pull out," he said cheerfully. "For when I pour in the sulfuric acid, the pressure will generate very quickly." Mr. Snodgrass looked at Mr. Fosdick, and Mr. Fosdick looked at Mr. Snodgrass. "Hurry," said the druggist. There was a compelling ring in the apothecary's voice, and slowly and with the greatest of reluctance, the men climbed into the machine. "I hope nothing happens," groaned Mr. Snodgrass. Mr. Fosdick made no reply. Although his face was pale, there was a set to his jaw that expressed a determination to stay with his machine to the end. No sooner were they seated than the druggist eagerly poured in 5 gallons of acid, and then quickly screwed down the cap. There was a sudden click of the pressure gauge, and the hand flew around to the extreme limit. "My God!" ejaculated Mr. Snodgrass. "The index shows the limit of the gauge, 600 pounds. At what point is your safety set?" "There is no safety valve," confessed Mr. Fosdick, weakly. "I didn't think it would be necessary." "The pressure is fine," exclaimed the druggist as his eye caught the gauge. "And agitating the reservoir always increases the action of the acid." And catching hold of the wheel, he gave the machine a vigorous shaking back and forth. "Stop that!" screamed Mr. Fosdick. "Do you want to blow us up?" The druggist suddenly stopped and scratched his chin. "I forgot something," he said cheerfully. "It is this. The acid will eat out your brass reservoir in a few minutes and will probably blow you into the next county." "Here!" yelled Mr. Snodgrass. "Let me out!" And he made a desperate effort to climb out of the machine. But the frightened Mr. Fosdick knew there was but one thing to do, and that was to reduce the pressure of the reservoir by exhausting the gas through the engine. With a sudden movement, he threw the throttle wide open, and then with the roar of a mogul engine, the Seidlitzmobile took down the dusty road at better than 100-mile-an-hour clip. Never has there been such a ride chronicled in the annals of automobiling as the maiden effort of the Seidlitzmobile. It made the 93 miles between Jonesboro and Smith's Corner in 27 minutes, and in 7 of the 9 towns it passed through it was reported as a comet. The other 2 wired the Weather Bureau of the visitation of that most unusual phenomenon of nature, a dry cloudburst. As the machine tore its way across the state, spouting carbonic acid gas from its exhaust pipes, it asphyxiated 37 dogs that endeavored to pursue it, and killed all vegetation on both sides of the road for a distance of 200 yards. Goose Creek, which paralleled the road for 40 miles, ran pure soda water for 2 weeks afterwards, and it cost Mr. Snodgrass $7,000 to have the oxygen replaced in 43 townships, which he did only after suit had been filed. How far the machine would have traveled is difficult to determine, although old Professor Snooks, Mr. Fosdick's implacable enemy, calculated that the Seidlitzmobile would have gone 3 and a fraction times around the Earth before becoming winded. But, as a matter of history, it did not go this distance. It made 111 miles before the druggist's prediction came true. At Smithers Junction, the reservoir exploded. It changed the course of Wildcat Run. The concussion was felt in 9 states, and the seismograph at the University of Tokyo reported an earthquake somewhere in the Aleutian Islands. Mr. Snodgrass and Mr. Fosdick finally came to Earth on a haystack, in an adjoining township after having made an ascent of 2 hours and 15 minutes, missing luncheon en route. The Aero Club of France, which sent a special representative to the spot, calculated their flight at something over 2 million kilometers, and presented both men with a pilot's license and an honorary membership in the club, which, it must be told, they both refused, saying that their flight was unpremeditated and that they could not honorably accept the licenses. When Mr. Snodgrass alighted upon the haystack, he found that Mr. Fosdick had preceded him by some minutes. There was a dazed, dreamy look upon Mr. Fosdick's face that somewhat alarmed his companion. "What's the matter, Fosdick?" he inquired, shaking him. "Are you unconscious?" "No," replied the genius, coming out of his musing with an appreciable effort. "I have just thought of a new invention." "Well, you can leave me out," retorted Mr. Snodgrass sourly. All right, that was a fun little short story. Not much else to say. There were 5 of these stories written by Jacque Morgan, and as far as I can tell, nothing else. So either he just wrote these 5 stories and, kind of did his own thing, or maybe he was famous somewhere else, or, working somewhere else or something. 2 of these stories never made it into Amazing Stories, so they're much harder to find. And in fact, even Wikisource doesn't seem to have the text of them. So, some of them might be lost media. I don't know. Anyway, I thought this was a fun story. It's probably the most relatable of the Fosdick stories that I read, and so I figured it'd be fun to do a quick reading. Anyway, that's what I've got for this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I got this book the other day, and so maybe I'll do a little like a little bit of Harlan Ellison reading or review at some point. Not reading because it's still under copyright, but review of some sort next week. I'm not sure, but anyway, have a good week, and I'll see you next time.